Welcome, everybody, to the Cincinnati Reds Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the Reds Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Shogo Akiyama versus Nick Senzel, who has the inside track to be the starting center fielder. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about Freddie Galvis, and his injury brings the shortstop depth into question. And the Reds are rolling with Galvis this upcoming season. Last year's late season pickup will be the team's starting shortstop, provided he's healthy. Galvis is currently being held out due to shoulder soreness, and though the Reds fully expect to get Galvis back onto the field in the upcoming days, the depth at shortstop is a bit concerning, at least it is to me. Now, all offseason, we've heard whispers of possible trade scenarios with an eye towards upgrading the shortstop positions. Names like Francisco Lindor and Corey Seager were tossed about. However, it appears, though, all along the Reds front office had Galvis in mind to man the position opening day against the St. Louis Cardinals in about a month. So, as a fan, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, Galvis owns the highest fielding percentage among active shortstops, and only two National League shortstops exceeded his 23 home runs last year. And while I'm not concerned about Galvis, I do have a little apprehension about the depth or lack of depth behind him at the shortstop position. Currently, if Galvis were unable to go, the Reds would likely turn to either Alex Blandino or Kyle Farmer. Now, I'm a big fan of Farmer, but strangely, while last December fans were drooling over the prospects of Yasiel Puig, Matt Kemp, and Alex Wood in a Reds uniform, Farmer is the only player from last year's winter trade with L.A. who's still on the roster. According to David Bell, Farmer will get a lot more reps at shortstop this spring. Now, again, I'm rooting for Farmer because I root for all the Reds. It's my team, and I think his ability to adapt to playing shortstop at a pinch could pave the way for Cincinnati to actually keep 6 outfielders on the 26-man roster. However, having a player with one major league inning as your primary backup at shortstop is concerning. Now, there's always the prospect of keeping Blandino on the active roster and having him back up Galvis. However, if you're giving me the choice between keeping Blandino or Irvin on the 26-man roster, I'm taking Irvin every time and rolling with Farmer as the backup at shortstop. I'd say the same thing if it came down to Blandino and Derek Dietrich for the roster spot. Now, the Reds have options, and according to MLB.com, Galvis is just a few days behind. Look for Farmer and Blandino as well as non-roster invitee Christian Colon to get the bulbs of rep at shortstop until Galvis is ready to return. All right, another thing I wanted to look at today was the Cincinnati Reds players who have, it's kind of a make-or-break season. And every year there are a handful of players who enter spring training looking for one last chance to show that they're capable of being a productive major league player. Last year, it was Robert Stevenson who finally proved that he could get the job done. Now, I think there's a handful of players here on the Reds roster that enter a make-or-break season in 2020. And entering spring camp last year, Stevenson had a career ERA of over 5, a whip of 1.673, and the right-hander was a former first-round pick of the Reds back in 2011. And though Cincinnati had spent a draft pick on Stevenson, it appeared as though his time in the organization was quickly coming to an end. Stevenson was coming off a season that he'd just soon forget, as would everybody else that saw it. He was 0-2 in 4 games with an ERA over 9, more walks than strikeouts. But Stevenson proved all the doubters wrong and latched on with the club out of spring training. Stevenson went on to have the best season of his career, owning a 3.76 ERA and drastically reducing his walk rate. Now, last year was a make-or-break season for Stevenson. It was imperative that he showed the Reds front office and coaching staff, as well as all of Major League Baseball, that he had what it takes to be a big league pitcher. Stevenson will be relied upon heavily this season for the Reds in the bullpen. So which guys have kind of a make-or-break season coming up this year? I'm going to start off with Cody Reed, who's a left-handed pitcher, and he enters this season with one last chance to make an impact. The left-hander was acquired as part of the deal that sent Johnny Cueto to Kansas City, and he's out of minor league options. Much like Stevenson last spring, Reed will likely be given every opportunity to make the 26-man roster, but his poor spring showing could sink any chance he has to make this or any other squad. Reed put together some solid stats last season. Unfortunately, a knee injury limited him to just 3 games. The Memphis native needs to put up some solid numbers this spring in order to lock up a spot in the Reds' bullpen. The one plus for Reed is that Amir Garrett is the only other lefty who's guaranteed a spot among Cincinnati's relief corps this season. The Reds have a few other southpaws looking to compete for that spinal spot in the bullpen. In addition to Reed, you have Jesse Biddle, Josh Smith, and Brooks Raley. They're all looking to crack the opening day roster also. Biddle has an outside shot to make the team, but Reed may have the inside track. The new rule requiring pitchers to face a minimum of 3 batters will have an impact on manager David Bell's decision of whom he decides to keep as part of this bullpen. For his career, Reed is much better against lefties than he is against righties, and Biddle actually has reverse splits, meaning he's better against righties than he is lefties. So I think Cody Reed is definitely a guy who is in a make-or-break season. Another guy I think is Jesse Winker. And the 2020 season is going to be really important for him. He's a former first-round pick. He struggled to stay healthy and faces an uphill climb to break through as an everyday player. The Reds added Akiyama and Nicholas Castanelos to the outfield mix. Phillip Ervin and Aristides Aquino will be looking to find a spot on the roster as well. Winker is in for a battle in this camp. And if there was a player who I was betting on to be the surprise of the 2020 season, it would be Winker. For all the flack that Winker has caught over the past 2 years, he's actually got some legitimate statistics that speak to his high ceiling. Winker's problem hasn't been production, it's been availability. In 2018, he was unexplainably benched in favor of an outfield of Billy Hamilton, Scott Schebler, and Adam Duvall. Eventually, Winker broke through and proved that position to be a terrible one. Unfortunately, a shoulder injury ended his season, and he'd only played 89 games. Last season, Winker played just 113 games after ending the season on the injured list. If you're looking for a player powerful from the left side with the ability to get on base, then Winker is your guy. He's the type of player that every GM, especially in the American League, would be drooling over. Winker's lack of speed and subpar defense are obstacles for him, but ones that a big year at the dish would vastly overshadow. Look for Winker to have a breakout in 2020. Next on my list is Tucker Barnhart. And last winter, the Reds were chasing JT Realmuto, and Cincinnati was heavily involved in talks with Yasmani Grandal this offseason. All of that noise should be kicking the pants for Barnhart. If Barnhart hopes to keep his spot on lockdown, a breakout season at the plate may be in order, especially with Tyler Stevenson rapidly ascending through the farm system. Barnhart is signed through the 2021 season and has a team option for 2022. So barring a trade, Tucker is going nowhere for the next 2 seasons. However, his role with the club could be a lot different this coming year, and even more so in 2021. Barnhart has changed his approach to the plate, going from switch hitter to exclusively hitting from the left-hand side. That change couldn't come at a better time for the Reds' backstop. Last season, David Bell decided to more evenly distribute the catching duties between Barnhart and Kirk Casale. Now, I'd look for more of the same this coming season, with Tucker more likely to see time in a lineup when a right-handed pitcher is on the mound. Stevenson, Cincinnati's top catching prospect, is likely to make his season debut at AAA Louisville. If Stevenson has similar success with the bats that he had in 2019 with the Chattanooga Lookouts, then the 23-year-old could make his big league debut as early as this season. Barnhart's production at the plate will make or break his long-term future for the Cincinnati Reds. Now, number 4 on my list is Phillip Ervin. He's an outfielder, and I hate putting Ervin on this list because he's 27. He had a nice season in 19, putting together a .271 batting average. But with the depth of the outfield, Ervin is going to have to find a way to stand out. Last season, Ervin took advantage of left-handed pitchers. Perhaps that'll be his niche with the 2020 version of the Cincinnati Reds. Nick Castellanos is likely to draw the everyday start in one of the 2 corner outfield spots. That'll leave a competition for the opposite corner. Ervin, Winker, Akiyama, Aquino will all be looking to earn playing time in the Reds' outfield. One thing that sets Ervin apart from the others, with the exception of Akiyama, is his ability to play all 3 spots. Last season, Ervin produced possibly the best offensive stats on the team and still couldn't make it out of Arizona. This year could be more of the same for Ervin. However, the Reds don't have the luxury of optioning the right-handed hitter down to AAA, as he's now out of minor league options. If Ervin survives the competition in spring camp, he'll still have an uphill climb to snag enough meaningful time in order to impress the coaching staff. Now, Irvin has been a player who's had to fight and claw his way up through the minor leagues in order to find adequate playing time in the bigs. And 2020 will be likely more of the same. I think Irvin has very little margin for error, but I do think Irvin is the guy mentally who could really get this done and have a nice season, even if it's coming off the bench for the Reds. All right, now we're going to look at the center field position, where the Reds drafted Nick Senzel with the number 2 overall pick in 2016. Now, Senzel has been one of the most highly rated prospects to come through the Reds farm system since Jay Bruce. This past winter, though, the Reds signed Shogo Akiyama, who became the first Japanese-born player to sign a big league contract with the Reds. Now, who's going to start opening day in center field? The center field position is one that has stumped Reds fans since the end of the 2019 season. Scott Schebler beat out Senzel in spring training last year and was named the opening day starter. However, a horrendous start to the season combined with an injured shoulder sent Schebler on a one-way ride down I-71 to AAA Louisville. Senzel made his debut with the Reds on May 3rd and was a fixture throughout most of the season. A couple of freak injuries kept him out of the lineup for a few games, but a mid-season adjustment to his swing was one of the biggest head-scratchers of Senzel's rookie campaign. The 24-year-old suffered a torn labrum towards the end of the season and finished the year on the IR. Akiyama came to Cincinnati after spending his entire professional career overseas. He's 31 years old. He's said to be able to play every outfield position, but spent the majority of his playing career in center field. Akiyama got a hit in his first at-bat of the spring on Sunday against the White Sox. Both Akiyama and Senzel are likely to see a lot of playing time this year. Now, Senzel has the versatility to play on the infield dirt, and Akiyama, as mentioned earlier, can play all 3 outfield spots. But who's going to get the call as the opening day starter in center field? Today we're going to analyze that question and look a little closer. Now, let's start off with Shogo Akiyama and his case to start. The one thing that Akiyama brings to center field is experience. Akiyama has spent his entire professional career on the outfield grass, while Nick Senzel just made the switch from infielder to outfielder in the 2019 season. Akiyama has over 900 games of experience playing in the outfield compared to 104 games in which Senzel played last season. Akiyama is also very adept at getting on base, which is a huge part of baseball. The more times you get on base, of course, the more opportunity you provide to your teammates to be able to bring you home, and that's exactly what Akiyama did over his entire career in Japan. Now, over the past 5 seasons with the Seibu Lions, Akiyama has an on-base percentage over 400 twice and never finished below 385. That's Joey Votto type stuff right there. And if Akiyama's game translates to Major League Baseball, then it'll be a force at the top of the Reds lineup. Therein lies the question, however. As Japanese players have not always been able to translate success overseas to success in the States, Akiyama would be going up against the best of the best on a nightly basis. And, we don't know what's going to happen there. Now, Akiyama has the makeup of a player who can compete at the highest level, but fans really won't know what to expect until regular season play begins. Akiyama is a bit of an unknown, but his potential to be a key piece of the 2020 Reds is definitely something to watch. Now, when we switch to Nick Senzel's case, he's definitely had a rough go on it on his path to the majors. He was drafted in the first round. It was assumed the former Tennessee Volunteer would eventually become the everyday third baseman for the Reds. No one foresaw the breakout year that Eugenio Suarez had in 2018, and Gino is now firmly entrenched as the Reds' third baseman for years to come. Once Suarez made the leap to stardom, Senzel began to see more time at second base while playing in the minors. However, Scooter Mania took over to Queen City, and Scooter Gennett looked to be the fixture of the Reds lineup going forward. Gennett, though, was eventually traded to the Giants, and Cincinnati signed Mike Moustakas to play second base this past winter. So for all those fans who want to see Senzel return to the infield, trust me, it's not going to happen unless there's an injury. Now, why I suspect that Senzel could play shortstop, obviously that's not the Reds front office wants to go here. With all of that out of the way, let's not act like Senzel is a below-average outfielder. Senzel is perhaps the fastest player on the team, which will serve him well playing up the middle of the outfield. Though he ended last season on the injury list with a torn labrum, It's assumed that the injury will have no ill effects on Senzel's ability to make throws from the outfield. Senzel was credited with 4 outfield assists last season. Then there's Senzel's ability at the plate. An advanced hitter when he arrived from the University of Tennessee, Senzel hit above 300 at every level of minor league ball. But, so I would say this. When you look at last year, Senzel batted .256. I would say don't let that fool you, because I definitely think that he can rake in the major leagues. Now, my prediction may be a little interesting, but I think this is an interesting battle to follow, and I think Nick Senzel will be the opening day starter. You know, provided that he's healthy, both Senzel and Akiyama will be on the Reds opening day roster. However, I think the nod will go to Senzel, who still has a bright future in Cincinnati. Opening day is an event in Cincinnati, and this will be a first for both Senzel and Akiyama. As Senzel began last season at AAA Louisville, in the end, however, I expect Senzel to get the start in center field and fully expect him to be batting leadoff against the Cardinals' presumptive starting pitcher, Jack Flaherty. In saying that, don't rule out the possibility of both Senzel and Akiyama taking the field together on opening day. Akiyama's ability to play the corner outfield spots could land him the start in left field, while free agent backup Nick Castellanos earns the start in right. Perhaps the real camp battle will not be for center field, but rather left field. Jesse Winker is entering a make-or-break season. You've got Aquino, who exploded onto the scene last August, but faded down the stretch. You've also got the likes of Phillip Ervin and Scott Schebler, who are looking for a seat at the table. The outfield battle itself will be the one to watch during training camp, and the Cincinnati Reds Weekly Show will be there to take a closer look at that during the upcoming days. And I can guarantee you this, Senzel and Akiyama will both see plenty of time in 2020 as the Reds make their quest to win the National League Central crown. And you can follow all that action here on the Cincinnati Reds Weekly Show every week. You can follow me at Grueling Truth on Twitter. And for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for now, this has been Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.